Welcome to Public Safety Committee meeting. I'm joined by my colleague, Pat Hogan, Jimmy Manto, Rita Peniawa, of course, Madam President, myself, Councilor Jen Chol, Chief Mon, Chief Cecil, and Commissioner Ojeda. So we will get going. The first thing we want to do is just, for the viewers, give us an overview of where we are currently, and why is the city looking to relocate?
Sure. Thanks, Counselor. So to back us up a couple of years, or maybe more than a couple of years, maybe 30 years, there's been a long identified need for new space for public safety in the city of Syracuse. We've got fire on the top floor of Public Safety Building, 511 South State, police in much of the remainder of the building. And for a long time now, the space has been lacking in a number of ways, operational, that I think the chiefs can better speak to than I. But in recent years, this has really accelerated. The deterioration of the building, some recent renovations uncovered serious needs in terms of mitigation of environmental contaminants, asbestos, bad air in basement office spaces. Employees have had to be moved out elsewhere because the building just isn't suitable anymore. At the same time, modern office needs have evolved since the building was built in the early 60s, and we're just no longer to the point where PSB is viable. It's functionally obsolete. It's nearing the end of its physical economic life. And so I think we need to do right, as we are by other city departments, getting these departments into modern, appropriate office space, helping first and foremost operationally, but also in terms of morale, employee retention, continuing to position the city of Syracuse as an employer of choice. So, as you can imagine, we've got the need for about 95,000 square feet of office space for these two departments. But in addition, there are the other activities that these departments engage in that make this a rather specialized need. Training spaces, security concerns mean that we can't just sign a lease and move into turnkey space in any of the vacant Class A office space. A large facility, place where predominantly our employees drive to work, and then pretty much exclusively our employees then take out the company car to do their jobs every day, which requires an enormous footprint, looking at the better part of 2 acres just for the parking. In addition to that, we need the training space, we need that space for the police department, and we need physical training space, defensive tactics, in-service training that's accomplished, could be accomplished in a new building like this. So we identified a developer who had an option on a property that seemed to check every box we had. It is relatively close to public transit, relatively close to central business, so it's accessible to the public, served by these departments, but also meets the operational needs that these departments have identified as PSB recently left a lot to be desired. When this opportunity presented itself, knowing that construction costs are out of control, going through the roof, with 81, labor and construction costs aren't going to get cheaper anytime soon. The city's financial situation is such that this seems the right time to take this opportunity and try to position ourselves to grow for the next 5 decades.
And what's the square footage of the current versus the new?
Current PSB is about 79,000 square feet of office space plus a basement that's theoretically functional, practically no longer functional, difficult to access, air quality problems. New building is just over 108,000 square feet total. That includes training space, small indoor garage facility with a sally port in case anybody wants to be transported literally by a car.
And you wanted, are you done? Yeah. You wanted to consolidate the Erie office with the downtown office. So, oh, okay. So that would be enough space for both of these, to consolidate both of these?
It's not only enough space to accomplish what we're currently doing at 511 South State for both fire and police, but this is also an enormous step forward in that we can now consolidate Patrol East, who's operating out of a
Right,
location.
so they're coming to this building?
That's right. All of our police patrol currently is based out of 2109 Erie Boulevard East. Everybody used to be centralized downtown. When the former North Garage was demolished in the early part of this century to build the new criminal courthouse, that was lost. Patrol was scattered off to Erie, And I'll certainly let Chief Cecil put it better than I can, but it's a real operational inefficiency. And that will be
The
cured
Erie
now.
is, we own that building, correct?
We do.
So we will sell it?
We're working to develop, we have a disposition strategy identified. We still have some need for light vehicle repair that currently can only be accomplished there, but if we're able to build on the new campus, we plan to do so.
So, Commissioner, so PSB costs us about 1.5 million a year?
For the next calendar year, based on the abstract that I've seen, we'll be paying just under $1.7 million a year for use of the PSB.
No, I'm talking about our, what's our cost for the current PSB?
Next year, it'll be a little under $1.7 million.
Okay, and this starts at $1 million.
In year one, this will be a little over.
And this will be,
$1.7 million.
I imagine the developer's going to go for a pilot agreement, correct?
It's a possibility.
And then,
I
so
haven't
there'll be
come-
some taxes involved, obviously.
Yes.
There's no taxes involved with the current PSB.
That's right. Current
So we'll
PSB
get
is
the-
on
we
about
get
2
some
acres.
revenue.
It's been wholly exempt since the late 50s. I
And
believe.
obviously, there's no parking down there. There's plenty of parking.
Limited on-site parking for employees first and foremost, but I think for any member of the public who wants to drive a car to PSB, you're just at the mercy of where you find curb space. And certainly in the 500 block, it's no sure thing.
What's the cost on the district east there, where the police muster out?
We've been working with budget to scrape together utilities and carrying costs for that. We're not there yet, but I'm pretty confident in saying it's more than the delta between the first year of the proposed new lease and the current situation at PSB.
Okay, so it's a more or less a wash, maybe probably more favorable than 1153 as far as costs go to the city.
In terms of,
Utilities are $22,300 a year at
next time.
Police East.
Repeat that again, Tim?
The utilities for the Erie Boulevard East Police location are like $22,000 a year.
Coupled with the opportunity cost of being in these two publicly owned, non-tax generating spaces, one in particular, the PSB, in a central location, the other on Erie Boulevard, with several hundred feet of frontage and a pretty attractive location also. I'd like to think this is better than revenue neutral.
So in other words, we'd be able to turn those properties into maybe developed, where somebody, developer would come along and develop those properties.
Yes, that's the goal.
Okay.
The current PSB is owned in part by the city and county.
And yes, that's a
So-
good foundational point I should have made. City and county are tenants in common at the PSB. We own 61% of the property.
This might be one of the great agreements, 1967 agreement that I've ever seen. Certainly interesting historically.
In the spirit of intermunicipal cooperation, it was a great agreement.
Yeah.
60 years later,
Yes, it's a little different.
the world has changed.
Yeah.
How much of the building is the county utilizing for office space versus us? Nothing?
Virtually nothing. Chief Cecil?
Yeah, so it is virtually nothing. There's a few folks, actually it's from the courts, that have their locker rooms in there. Other than that, any county employees would be the maintenance folks. Very, very minimal.
We pay the maintenance folks, right? The city does?
We do. That's part
Yeah.
of the $1,684,000
For
a
the-
year.
Yeah, okay.
But Matt, you said that we own the space. We own what, 61% of it?
We own 61%, and we pay rent on the entirety, as if, we are the tenant to our own landlord. It's an interesting deal.
So when we went there the other day, it was a very sad tour. I mean, the premises are horrible. The offices are not, I mean, they're very in poor condition. So one of the things that stood out mostly to me is all the wiring that it's like everywhere. Actually, a little dangerous, I would think, but what do I know? So in the new place, the connectivity for internet and all of what's the IT and all of that, because these old buildings usually have a problem with the, electricity and connectivity with all this new equipment. Will we be okay?
This will be a fully wired building. It's a legacy industrial building, cast in place concrete, but it's going to be gutted to its superstructure and floor slabs and rebuilt according to 21st century standards with all the technology that both departments, who have been involved at every step of the design stage.
It doesn't look
believe
like
they
they
need.
have that right now, do you? No.
Again, it was built to the standards of its
No,
era, but
I mean, the current building.
Yeah,
It's like,
no, fiber is strung underneath the ceiling rather than in the duct banks. It's dated.
Yeah, anytime we're trying to install or improve anything, we have to worry about asbestos. if we tamper with the ceiling, we tamper with the floor, we tamper with the walls. I mean, just as an example, we're trying to put up a kiosk or one of the, like, we have, when you walk into the building, it tells you what floor everybody's on. We're trying to put an electronic one of those up. What are those called? Not kiosks, but an electronic board, like everybody has, that shows you, and you can actually put things out, like events that are going on. We wanted to put it right near the elevator, but no one could figure out how to wire into those marble walls or granite walls or whatever they are. So anytime we want to do any type of improvement, we struggle.
So can you review the timeline when construction would begin? We would be the tenants, right? So we wouldn't own the building, and therefore the property would be on the tax rolls with the exception of the tax breaks.
Well,
that
it'd be a
we'll get in
pilot
the beginning,
agreement, but right now, we're not getting anything.
That's
You know,
right.
I mean, we own the building.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
So, and the developer is here to launch and do a short presentation after we finished introducing. But yeah, the developer already controls the property, would be prepared to start construction fairly soon after legislative approvals are obtained. Expect 8 to 12 months, I think, of construction. We would want to be in by the third quarter of calendar year '25.
Have we ever looked at, assume that we wanted to stay in there, have we ever looked at the cost of renovating that building?
So yeah, Eric and I and Michael, the new deputy in assessment, have worked closely with engineering to try to develop some ballpark estimates. We've been provided with interesting comparables around the country where police stations have been built, from greenfield, ground up. We're looking at costs that I would say exceed by more than 50% the estimates we're seeing. We'd be looking at probably north of $20 million, probably closer to 40, to build a new station at PSB. And that doesn't get us away from the fundamental problem, which is where does one put the tenants of PSB while a new building is being
constructed? I have the schedule here for the cost of the next 19 years. And for the obvious reason, it's increasing every year, right? But it looks like in the next, if you were to look at it from this sheet, the next 19 years, you're obviously looking at close to what you just said to renovate it. Now, I guess my question, if we were to renovate it, where would the fund be coming from?
That's another question. I know Eric has worked hard to identify funding sources in conjunction with the developer. The prospect of tracking down grant dollars for construction of our own public safety building has eluded us.
Okay, and then I guess the now question is, is there a way ARPA money could be used for that?
Ooh, I'd better defer to somebody more knowledgeable about ARPA than I.
Frank is shaking his head.
The ARPA money is mostly allocated, correct, Eric?
Thank you. Counselor Hogan. ARPA money is kind of over-allocated, I guess, would be what Jen Tiff would say. So I guess you're looking at, you could pay cash with fund balance. You could issue bonds and pay for it over time. So you'd probably be comparing it to issuing bonds and then having some amount of interest, 3-4%, that we pay back over time, which I think is why Matt says it'd be probably 50% more expensive to do it ourselves and renovate it than to just make a move now.
The other important consideration, not only are we partnering with a developer who has experience in this type of work, but as a private entity, he's able to leverage historic tax credits in a way that as a municipality we wouldn't. We aren't well-versed in the development business. There are significant cost savings, I think, to be realized by renting from a party who's accustomed to doing this kind of work and tackling such a project ourselves.
And Director Rudd, thank you. Director Rudd, I was, Council Green had asked me to, as the Chair of Finance, asked me to see if you were comfortable with the proposal, and can it be incorporated into next year's budget?
Can the lease payments be built into next year's budget? Yes.
And you comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable with it. I think it's, you're gonna pay for police and fire one way or the other. And this demonstrably gets us better space, probably as fast as possible, in a situation that seems to meet everyone's basic requirements.
Thank you. Now, how do we answer the question of accessibility and comfort from the public, especially considering that with the PSB being right here, you know, you could take 2 mile going east, 2 mile going west, 2 mile, and you could access it easily. Somebody coming from the bus to come to PSB can, you know, get off the bus station and walk right over. How do we answer that? That's the first question. The other part is considering the atmosphere of the community and the way the community is shaped. How do we answer that, considering that the PSB is all the way to the west side?
That's a good question. To the accessibility, this new property will have on-site parking, which the current doesn't. As far as being within the walk shed of a certain number of households, especially households who are headed to the public safety headquarters to do business, there's no doubt that downtown is more centrally located, but this is adjacent to several dense residential neighborhoods, well connected to the street grid, in neighborhoods with pedestrian facilities, and it's close to several major bus lines. I think also with planned enhancements to the neighborhood, Syracuse Developmental Center first among them, certainly Tipperary Hill revitalization going on. I think there's an opportunity here to discuss with Centro the possibility of enhancing service even further.
Actually, the whole West Fayette Street corridor is undergoing renovation, really.
And that's a good point, too.
You know, so, I mean, there's a lot of plans, and obviously, we have the Career Academy of Fowler High School that's a pretty nice little plus, too.
We feel there's a tremendous opportunity for synergy here on a public service campus, anchored by both PSLA at Fowler and, of course, Police and Fire's headquarters. Councilor Majoke, to your more specific accessibility question, I know SPD has worked throughout the summer at quantifying what we suspected anecdotally about people coming to the PSB, and I'd be happy for him to speak a little more specifically about it.
Counselor, I don't know if you got it, but I have a copy. I emailed that to everybody, and that kind of breaks down the number of people over the period of time that we monitored where they were coming from. During this reporting period, which was several months, it was 476 people came to the public safety. I can email that out again so everybody will have it again. And then it's broken down in a spreadsheet so you can sort it any way you want, right? So I took the liberty to sort it 3 different ways. One being what was the mode of transportation. The vast majority, 58% of the people took cars or their own personal vehicles to get there. 36% being the second most popular method had walked in, which over this period of time was 170 people. And then I also broke it down by what their businesses were doing at the public safety building. And then I also broke it down by zip code, so we could see where people were coming from. And if you're really handy with a spreadsheet, you can see who walked and what zip codes are coming from, because you can spread one level, then break it down further, so you can see how many people are walking from certain neighborhoods as well. And I can provide that for you if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, Chief, that's great data. I just, you know, with my experience with the community, I think the individual that need police services the most, the last thing they want to do is take a police survey. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I get that. That's great. But individual that would need the services the most would not take that survey. And I'm just concerned that we move it to that, PSB to that direction, and they want to get to PSB, yet they might be having issues with that side of town, and they don't want to go down there. And you know this better than I do, that there is feud or in all directions. And somebody has actually expressed that to me, saying, Joel, if we move PSB to the west side, what about folks at north side that never go to west side? What about folks at South Side that don't go to West Side? And they need police services. What do we do with them?
So we looked at that particular area is not affiliated with any particular groups, right, or gangs, however you want to term that. We also realized that downtown would be the optimal place to be for our own purposes, but it's just not practical right now. When you weigh what would be our optimal location versus what would be our optimal way to operate, we'd operate a lot easier out of a new facility with all the modern accoutrements that we were talking about as far as electronics and location next to PSLA. So we would prefer to be downtown. There's just no place that we could locate to do that.
And before I let my colleague go ahead, last one, Chief, with the comfort and people getting used to downtown, and with downtown being so heavily dense, with the police presence being known here, what's the strategy if you were to move everything off away from downtown, with everything that the police department was providing, its present and everything else? What's the strategy to kind of improvise?
Well, it's the same kind of strategy we've always had, because keep in mind, we've never been really centralized, even though many people work out of downtown. As has already been mentioned, the great bulk of our, if not all of our patrol officers work on Erie Boulevard in a commercial area, really, to be honest. I think we have to look at the benefits of moving into a neighborhood, especially a neighborhood like the West End, who has its challenges. And just the idea of merely having patrol cars come and go to this office on a regular basis, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I believe can change those challenges in that neighborhood. And as mentioned before, too, is the PSLA, where we're recruiting cadets who want to eventually become police officers. The mere fact that the police department is in this challenged neighborhood, which has been on the radar before in the past as, I think, one or two of the most depressed areas in the entire nation, having a police department there where people can aspire to be police officers. And again, just the mere fact of vehicles, marked vehicles coming and going from that various area could turn that neighborhood around. So I think we have to look at the positives. Downtown, yeah, as First Deputy Chief Schaaf mentioned, love to be centralized, love to stay downtown. I don't like to use the word aged out for buildings or people. You know what I mean, Pat?
No, absolutely, Council. Thank you, Chief.
Try not to use that word.
God bless you.
But it's come to its end, and we struggle every day with trying to find space, find parking. I think this will be more accessible, as some people have mentioned, if not everybody, in the fact that if you come down to the PSB, if you're not walking, you're not going to probably find a spot. You're going to drive around trying to find a spot to park. Even when we have events like Jimmy Oliver's Pal, and we have families coming down, and there's nowhere to park. So again, I think for all the various reasons, going in there in this new area will help. But I think it will improve that neighborhood, which again, is one of our most challenging neighborhoods.
You know, to the Chief's point, I mean, in actuality, last I know, the city of Syracuse is in Brooklyn. It's 26 square miles, and you can access almost any point anywhere in the city from that area. You know, you got a street, and you got 690, you got 81. So, I mean, I think it might not be physically central, but it's pretty central to anywhere you need to go.
Other question before the presentation?
Quick question, what's the timeline of the lease? Like, is it a 10-year lease, 20-year lease,
This is a 19-year lease.
19?
Just to not be too flip about saying, I do think this is a good, solid step. The one thing I think that all of us are aware of as being a risk is just the paying for two properties at one time for a potential period. And I think that's something to keep in mind, but it is just part of what's necessary to change, right? So we currently pay for the PSB on the abstract. The point is that would go away with time, but there is the question of how long would it take us to dispose of the asset, so to speak. So there is that risk initially, but we're all well aware of that and think we've come along with our asset disposition group to try to have, and we basically think it's an opportunity. So like at this point in time, the opportunity outweighs kind of like the burden of having that on the horizon. But it is something to keep in mind.
Well, to that point, who is handling the negotiations with the county administration? Kaliva.
Afternoon, Frank Kaliva, the city's chief administrative officer. We're working with the county on a disposition plan. They understand that the asset has come to the end of its life, as the chief mentioned, and they conceivably might have some uses for it, but at this point, nothing specific. So we'll start working with them right after the first of the year to aggressively put it on the market. The goal would be, as Mr. Rudd said, the goal would be to have disposed of it before we're in the new property.
So the 1.7 million that the city currently pays the county to quote, maintain PSB, is that negotiable since repairs haven't really been done?
So that is based on actual costs. All the costs that are passed on the abstract are reconciled it's usually on a 2-year cycle by the county, so they pass along the actual costs. So it's not really negotiable as such, but we are certainly thinking that it is probably not as highly valued as paying a similar amount for a new property.
If we pay 1.7, what does county pay? Well,
I don't know what their costs above and beyond that are, but since we're the primary occupants, we pay the primary costs, Councilor.
other questions?
Just one more. So, what about the $2 million grant? Is that already solidified, or the New York State?
I don't believe it is.
It isn't. Eric, I think, can speak.
Restore
That one, yeah.
Correct.
Good afternoon, councilors. So built within the lease, one of the things that we have been doing is pursuing and identifying funding sources. So as part of this project, Restore New York, as Councilor Hogan just mentioned, was a city award that was awarded to the West Side, and we've incorporated the project at 1153 as part of that. So that award right now that we have committed, secured, is $600,000. One of the things we've also been doing is looking at other security grants or public safety grants that may be out there, in addition to what we've already secured through the state program. So the intent is then, as part of the built-in structure of the lease, is to reach a $2 million threshold on funding secured for the project that could help subsidize the overall cost of the project. So that was based on that structure. So we've secured some funding as part of the project and through working with Joe and the project team. But then one of the things we're working with doing is the city research department is also actively pursuing other funding opportunities for the project.
So from the 40 million that ballpark figure this will cost, how much do you have secured, more or less?
So one of the things that is built in is looking at, for the additional funding the city's able to secure, that will directly translate to what the actual lease rate is. So there's some flexibility around the interest rate and the terms within the lease that's built in. Based on the more funding we can secure for the project, that's going to lower the city's cost over that 19-year period. So one of the things that that's a motivator for us, is looking at those additional programs to be able to help underwrite the cost of the project.
When you talk about the lease agreement, is there a lease agreement? Because I haven't seen anything come across our table.
No, we are seeking council authorization for a lease agreement. We have a non-binding letter of intent that we've discussed at length informally. But no, once we get council authorization to negotiate a lease, then we anticipate having a lease in pretty short order. We do want to keep the momentum going and get these two departments into this building sooner than later.
Part of the reason, some of the background though, what prompted us to ask the question is, as the city is going out looking for additional funding and securing, our question was then, what ultimately would that do to the city's requirement and cost to pay? And so that was one of the discussions we've been having with the project team, is that we wanted to build in that flexibility so that we could lower the overall cost if we're successful in securing additional grant funding. So that was some of, as we're having these continued discussions and negotiations, building that in was important, because of the fact that, we believe there's other dollars, other programs that would be out there that would support this type of use and this other capital need.
So outside of ESD, do you already have something that's, like
So
Maybe not
those
secured
Restore New
fully,
York
but-
dollars are the only funds secured to the project. I know there's been meetings and discussions between the grants and research staff, and they're actively going out. They're pursuing, looking at federal, state, other resources. Yeah, so that search will continue as this process unfolds.
And you think the 2025 deadline that you have here to start, like shoveling?
It is, so one of the benefits, I will say, just as we were talking about kind of the if the city were to develop a new public safety headquarters, the city has not always been able to prove the best on a real estate development standpoint. And I think that one of the benefits with this public-private partnership is that being able to maximize and do the project efficiently so that ultimately the city would not have to undertake building a new, and we've seen other communities that have done this, that have built state-of-the-art headquarters, but those can often be 2, if not 3 times the overall cost. In this case, because of the fact that you have the tax credits, which the city would not be able to seek or secure tax credits, but a private developer can. The building has that historic status and that historic designation. There's a very limited number of properties in the city that can attain that. But one of the benefits is that based on timeline, Joe and the project team, they've been working with Huber Brewer, so they have built out a really sophisticated look at what the timeline would be. And Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but 10 to 12 months or so based on that time frame. And that I would imagine is much sooner than what a city project might look like.
And we want to point out that, of course, Joe's a local developer. We got local people on this too, and I think that's important because obviously we've had issues with out-of-towners.
My question for you, right, is you said that you're looking at the council to put the lease agreement on our agenda and move it, and there's no lease agreement available, so we're gonna move something that we haven't seen?
No, it's customary. We can't execute a lease agreement without council authorization. So we couldn't put the cart before the horse. We need council permission to enter into a lease. So to that end of council's needing to see more detail, we did pass along the draft LOI from October that contains, yes. I hope everybody's gotten a chance to see it.
Yeah, let me see later.
Oh, that's this.
So with that, Eric, did we also look at other properties around here, or was it just a decision that was it and we're sticking with it?
So a little bit of background and context. So we Syracuse Police had been looking at other facilities and looking at additional needs, and this spanned everything from storage and looking at the ability to do evidence storage and materials that needed work. And then one of the things that 1153 was an option that was submitted as part of the city's RFP process when we were looking for new office space through One Park Place. One of the conversations that we had was that looking at the uniqueness of the facility, of the site, the proximity to Fowler, there's a lot of things that were interesting from a new public safety headquarters perspective. But then all the while, we also then put out a call and we're looking at from other real estate brokers and other real estate developers an opportunity for, based on the square footage, based on the overall needs for this type of use, what other sites were out there. Ultimately, we were able to get a few responses. We had taken a look at just a project of this size and scale. There's a very limited number of properties. And then on top of that, again, I mentioned the historic tax credits and the fact that there was some additional subsidy and tax credits this project would be supported by, that none of the other options that we had looked at were able to be supported by. And then lastly, I think we did take into consideration things like accessibility. We did take into consideration things like making sure we're able to improve the overall customer service experience. The point about the transportation access is critically important. We also considered location as well. There is, this search, and it's one of the things that I've learned and gathered and just some of my local interest in history, that we've looked at other sites previously for replacement for the PSB in the past. Some of those were the 300 East Washington Street, formerly known as the 9X building. That project is right across the street from City Hall. That project has now been successfully redeveloped into a mixed-use building. But at the time it was vacant, there were discussions about fire and police being able to make use of that facility. At one point, before it was the STEAM school, Central Tech, there was some history and discussion around could Central Tech be repurposed as a public safety headquarters. Now, which points to the momentum and success of downtown, those buildings, 300 East Washington has been fully redeveloped. the STEAM school plan is moving forward. And so I think that it's pointing to the highest and best use. But as we've looked at, there's been previous proposals for 1153 that the neighborhood has had concerns about, particularly around low-income housing tax credit projects that have, been unsuccessful. So the neighborhood itself has really been vocal about what things they do want to see and things they don't want to see in this neighborhood. We've been able to have discussions with adjacent property owners and really getting a feel around this type of proposed use within this neighborhood, within 1153. So we've looked at a number of other sites and opportunities. There's very few that meet this type of use. The fact that the city owns about 4 acres immediately next door, as well as PSLA, and the benefits that come from PSLA for our cadet and our recruitment program for fire and police. And then lastly, just the adaptive reuse and the fact that there's a very limited number of buildings that really meet this type of size, scale, square footage. We think that we've really considered and looked at these other sites and other alternatives. And I think if you were to kind of choose your own adventure between fully scraping, building a brand new headquarters compared to this proposal, this is the one that's more cost effective. The fact the city would not have to do the development ourselves. And then lastly, the timeline is that we could have a new facility much sooner than if we were doing it ourselves.
So on books, beside the 1153, around here, which one submitted it for?
Sorry.
So you were saying that there was a proposal, right?
Oh, the alternative options.
For the buildings. Which one specifically around here was considered on the books? Not, I get the 300, the commons, all, yes,
Sure.
were being explored. But what buildings specifically were part of that?
What do you mean? You mean other buildings that have 100,000 square feet?
Other
I don't
buildings
know
that
how many other
were
buildings in the
part,
city
that
there are.
actually submitted it,
Okay.
aside from 1153.
Sure. So when we had done that call for initial sites, there was a location on Erie Boulevard with a largely underutilized office building that did have the parking, and that was one of the concerns, is making sure there was enough space for the parking needs and the fleet. So that was one option that that we looked at. Another option was looking at really the underutilized office space within downtown Syracuse. The equitable towers is one of the options that was floated and discussed. One of the things we needed to also look at is, because of the sensitivity around the use of the building, is it possible, is it feasible for city police and fire staff to be sharing a building or sharing as being part of a large-scale office building with other tenants, and just looking at the security implications of that. So it also came down to logistics. And so one of the things, as we talked about this plan and this development, the city would ultimately be the anchor tenant of this building, but also being able to have the type of security measures, even just being able to figure out where certain staff need to enter buildings and where maybe it's not necessary to, from an accessibility and protocol standpoint, sharing a large-scale office building in downtown Syracuse was more challenging, just logistically speaking. So we did look at these other sites, absolutely wanted to make sure it was not solely just looking at 1153, but for a number of factors, it rose to the top as our primary and most optimal choice.
Questions, and I'm sure that you can clarify them for me, right? Because it says here that the tenant shall be responsible for all costs of operating the premises, including maintenance, replacement, repair, insurance, utilities, and real estate taxes.
So taxes essentially would be a pass-through. This is a master lease of the property, so we'd be responsible for the bulk of expenses. Structural, standard, fundamental parts of the building, we would not be responsible for. But basic day-to-day maintenance, something so simple as plowing the lot, is something not only this LOI would suggest that we take care of, but that operationally we need to take care of. The needs of police and fire can't simply bend to relying upon the landlord's commissioned plow guy to come around if we get 8 inches of snow and they need to get out on patrol. So these are things that we've developed a comfort level bringing in-house, and we would certainly want to be responsible for doing.
Maybe we can prevail upon the Department of Public Works to take care of that lot.
We do have subject matter experts with plowing on staff.
Then I have one more. It says that the tenant shall be responsible for any fees owed to other owners. What does that mean?
Oh, just a standard boilerplate. Had we commissioned a broker to conduct this search for us, which we didn't, we would have to pay. It would not be on Joe and the development team to pay.
Like you said, the taxes are a pass-through, so they are,
Tax liability would ultimately, be paid by us under the structure of the lease.
do we do that at One Park Place currently?
We pay a pro rata share, that's part of the additional rent over there.
For general improvements and, you know, maintenance and things like that, we're responsible. But if something bigger would happen to the facility, then the landlord is responsible?
If a roof problem develops,
Or
or
something like that.
you know, anything building envelope related, structural, yes, we would give notice to the landlord would come over and set that right.
So with us being responsible partially for the taxes, I see here that monthly, when you break down the cost, for example, for the first year, it's gonna cost us $147,000, $402 a month, right? Now, with that, is the taxes calculated into that, or are we coming, is it a separate charge?
That would take the form of additional rent,
Okay.
not knowing what the
And what
ultimate
is that?
assessment would be. You know, I'd probably be hard pressed to ballpark an assessment at this
Okay.
stage, especially not knowing equalization rates in the future. But it would be more, probably not significantly more.
Okay.
Special purpose properties like this are not common in the city, but it would be some additional amount.
Can we
We can do our best.
see
to-
something
we can ballpark
in
that.
numbers, just so that
Sure.
we know what we are getting into?
And Eric, I'm sure that without site control, it'd be harder to get any grant money from anyone.
So it's been an interesting process. You know, one of the things that with this being a private development, you know, we've had discussions around the economic development opportunity, economic development programs. You know, some of those discussions have been more successful than others. And so in some cases, it's going to be a municipal tenant, but at the end of the day, it's still privately owned development. You know, this would almost be similar to redeveloping an office building and not knowing who the tenant is necessarily, but it would be a state-of-the-art office building and a complete adaptive reuse. And we've seen that successful model throughout Syracuse and throughout cities across the country. In this case, one of the things we realized going into this project, the anchor tenant is us. The anchor tenant has quote-unquote been identified. But at the end of the day, this is still very much a private development, private project, and it's a developer that has tremendous experience working on projects in the city. Yep.
All right, can we get to the presentation?
Yes.
Absolutely. So Joe Gem and our architecture. We'll see if the big screen works.
Many skills there.
So good afternoon, Joe Gem with LaHinch Group. So the presentation is for the counselors who were able to make the PSP tour. Just going to go through some of the same slides. Talk about the site, the general programming. Ashley and Steve with McKnight Architects are here with our team as well. They've been working with both the police department and the fire department for the last several months on trying to really nail down programming that works today and down the road, future growth as well. So that's one of Steve's very nice cartoons that he typically puts together for us. So that's actually looking west. That's on West Fayette Street. You can kind of see the bridge to the bottom right there, headed up towards Tipperary Hill. 6-story main building, which we call the historic building, part of the Light Rollaway campus. The barn that is painted black here is currently red if you drive by. You'll see on the programming slide, that's typically where we're planning for indoor parking, and then the shoot house for the fire department, and then there's a single-story building around the back to the west that you cannot see from this elevation.
Can you just make a little comment about the shoot house, that it's not live?
Yeah, Chief, I don't know if you want to.
So, yeah,
For the
shoot,
public.
sure, so the shoot house is just simunitions, not live rounds, just a way to train with simunitions. And again, they're not live rounds. It's not a firing range.
Thank you.
All right, so the main parcel being where the 3 buildings are connected, it's about 3 acres on site. You'll see to the left, which would be the northwest corner, that is city-owned land. We're calling that the Magnolia Street lot. All in all, we're north of just about 350 parking spots. I can't quite see that far from here. About 350 spots. Again, you got the two-story barn, the red barn, where it says one story, that is for storage and document storage. And then on the west side, you'll see when we get to more of the floor plan, that's for public engagement. So 6 stories, first floor being mostly patrol, public engagement. Second floor would be the fitness center, locker rooms specific for police and fire, male, female, and then 3, 4, 5 would be the police department, and 6 would be the fire department. Thanks, Eric. All right, so again, here on the first floor, the majority of that space being the green space is patrol. Public engagement is on the right side, so that would be the west, going towards, again, Tipperary Hill, so there's parking over there. Oh, you want to jump in? Oh, okay, perfect. I'm going to have Ashley talk, because she did a lot of this with both police and fire, changing floor plans quite a bit.
Right, so Fayette Street is along the bottom.
Can you get closer to the mic? Sorry, these things are fussy.
Yep, Fayette Street is along the bottom of the floor plan here. And as we talked about before, the division of parking and access by the public. So over on the right-hand side is the public entrance and public parking. And on the left-hand side is the majority of employee parking. And the employee entrance is on the left as well. So we have that division of employee staff on the left and public on the right. And that is a good point for how this building serves the public better than the current PSB building. So currently when you go to the PSB, public amenities are scattered throughout the building. So we wanted to make a point to centralize anything that the public needs right here near the main entrance for the public. So we have the records and property. Property is in blue and records is in gray, which are 2 of the main reasons that people of the public come to visit the building, as well as we have the sex offender check-in area on the first floor as well.
Just point out there's a media room to the left, Eric, right where that red box is, I believe. Yep, so it's a dedicated media room, press conferences. I know, talking with Chief Cecil and Schaaf, that, oftentimes it's throwing stuff up, taking it down, et cetera, et cetera. So having a dedicated media room, was one of the amenities that everybody wanted to see.
This is the second floor plan. It's just the locker rooms that we talked about earlier. Quite an upgrade from what they currently have at the PSB, as well as a state-of-the-art fitness center with windows much larger than the police and fire departments currently have. Third floor is defensive tactics and the academy and cadet classrooms, which is currently at OCC, so we'd be moving that part of the program to a central location here at the new PSB. The next floor is the CID unit of the police department, as well as the crime scene unit.
So on this one right here, where it says plumbing required, is that already been updated, or is it going to plumbing going to be?
So all plumbing is going to be brand new in the building. That was just a note internally for us when we were doing budgeting. Thank you. Next, please. The 5th floor is the police chief suite, as well as some additional office space, HR, et cetera, and the police crime analysis center. That's what you see there in the purple. And then Similarly to the current PSB, the top floor of 1153 would be the fire department.
What's the difference with this special events media relations space that was just on the last floor that you were on versus the media room that's on the second floor?
On the sixth floor?
This is A105, so is that
Oh, on the
floor?
fifth floor, that is office space for the event staff. And then on the first floor is where they host media-related, I'm sorry, yeah, press conference.
Press conferences, okay.
Yep, and this last page is just a section view. If you're cutting through the building, anything in blue is police department-related space, and anything in the pink is fire department-related space. And you can see the relationship of the six-story building to that single-story barn space that was mentioned earlier on the left.
So in terms of configuration, because one of the things that we, the police department has been trying to do is be strong in community engagement. Is there any way of reconfiguring this space to also include community use or in any way, or?
Yes, so it's pretty tight right now. We don't have a community room, but what we've been doing, and Jimmy Oliver's been doing it, if there's an event that, where they can use the auditorium in here, because we have three, if you notice, there was three, on one floor, there was basically three auditorium rooms with the accordion doors. And when they're all opened up, you have a large space there that Mr. Oliver will be able to bring them in. For instance, when he just recently did a computer skills course that was over 6 weeks long, he used our auditorium that's currently in the PSB. It's nowhere near as nice as that right there. So there will be opportunities for that, but as far as a dedicated community room, we don't have that in here.
It's probably important, just, can you talk a little bit about how bad the deterioration of the current building is?
Yeah, sure. So, again, I've been there, I came out in 1985, and so I've seen this building go through the various stages. It's falling apart. Something as simple as trying to replace carpeting, we can't do. The county says they can't pull up carpet because it would create asbestos problems. They can lay a carpet over the top of that carpet, in which case you have 3 or 4 layers and people trip over them. The walls, it's difficult to run wires in the walls because it's all granite. So anytime you want to put up a camera, run wires for any type of modern thing like TVs, cameras, or that kiosk thing that I was talking about. Yeah, it's difficult. It's a challenge to do it. Beyond that, there's health concerns. We had the cadet program running in the basement of that building several months ago. It was determined that the air down there was bad. We had somebody come in and check it, and sure enough, there was some bad air coming through the air ducts. And we had folks down there, young people, who wanted to be police officers down there. Now, we moved them, and they haven't experienced any health issues, but they were down in that building. We had to find another space for them. There's other parts of this building that are deemed to be unsafe as well. You have a weight room, and keep in mind, one of the pillars, 6 pillars of law enforcement, one of those pillars is officer wellness. So we encourage officers to go and work out, even during their shift, to get down there and stay fit, stay healthy. Our workout room is subpar. There's no windows in it. The equipment it's filled up with all kinds of, the equipment's not too bad, not too antiquated, but it's jammed in there so you can barely move. Very few officers use it. This is going to be a state-of-the-art workout thing that will adhere to that pillar of law enforcement to keep our officers healthy and well. Beyond that, it's just a challenge almost every single day. If we're trying to put something more progressive in there, we run into it, or if we find another area in the building where we have people that feel unhealthy because of something that's going on with the building. It's just run out of usefulness there, and we struggle. We struggle with just space as well. Our police department does continue to grow, even though we're struggling to get officers on, and we're starting to see them come on the department. But what we have been able to do beyond that is is hire SPOs, police officers that have retired, and they come back and fill important jobs for us. We have our cadets in there, 16 cadets walking around the building, doing different functions. So even though officer-wise, we still struggle, the overall strength of our police department, number-wise, civilian-wise, is continues to grow. And we continue to try to find places to put those folks as we continue to grow. This will allow us to grow not only immediately when we get in there, but as our department continues to grow as well.
I also think, Jimmy, that the conditions of those offices, as we're trying to attract new talent and keep them, in the conditions. I mean, if you see what we saw, it's horrible.
I've been in there.
The floors. You walk on the floor. It seems like you're gonna go to the underfloor. It gives in as you walk in the hallways. It's horrible.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because when we bring young people in, whether it's to do help them study for the exam, the civil service test, or they're coming in for intake night, they're coming into that building and deciding this is where I want to work. Now, they don't necessarily work out of that building, but this is the image of the Syracuse Police Department, is that building. They're walking down the same hallways. You walk down, seeing wires hanging out, dirty floors, tiles pulled up, things
Narrow
deteriorating.
hallways, cramped conditions.
Yes.
I've been over there
Cramped,
plenty of times.
exactly.
It's unbelievable you've been able to survive it.
It's just not feasible anymore to be there.
What about Chief Mann in terms of fire? What's the sixth floor looking like for you? Is it comprehensive to what you need? Is it?
Pretty much, we just have an office space. We have an office space on the sixth floor of the current public safety building. We're gonna just move our space over. It's gonna be a safer space. We're gonna have some space on the first floor of the new building, which is gonna make our daily meetings of administration and our command staff more efficient, because right now that isn't located at the public safety building, so it's gonna streamline a lot of the work that we're doing.
What about the training for your recruit? Is that also going to?
There's definitely going to be a space in this building for training and for training of our incident commanders who operate fires. They're like our supervisors, and so there's going to be a space up there. We're also going to have an emergency operations center, which during weather events or any public safety events in the city, being with the police department, or if we got to bring in the DPW, we're going to have a space to utilize for that, which we currently don't have.
One other point, I was just going to ask if Chief Cecil can speak a little bit more too, but just the regional implications of this facility as well. So we've talked a little bit about the academy and that opportunity. I know that OCC has been a longstanding home for the academy, and I think there's still some discussions that need to be had about kind of what long-term that looks like, but OCC has been that home. But the other thing is that the training, the defensive tactics, so there are certain things right now that Syracuse police have to leave the city to go out and do that training. Chief, can you just speak to some of that and the fact that the way this is being designed is that no longer the city, like SPD would not have to then leave the city and go out of Syracuse to be able to do that, but also that cost would now be housed, like basically instead of paying another site to use that site, you would be able to do that at 1153, and then potentially other law enforcement agencies that need that type of use could also look to this facility as well. But could you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, it's amazing as this project has continued on. It's like everyone in here can speak about police work very well. You've got Matt, Eric, all these people. This is how much we've schooled them up on what we do. Oh, it's great. But, the first part of it, being able to bring the academy back down there, OCC's been a great partner, and we hate to lose that partnership, but bringing our academy down there, what we used to be able to do when we were at the PSP is we take that academy out and run them around the city when they're doing physical fitness. They'd stop in various neighborhoods in the city and do their physical fitness. And you'd hear from people, hey, there was a bunch of cadets recruits out there doing push-ups on my street. They'd get to know the neighborhoods, get to know the people, get to know the very city that they're gonna start serving. So that's one benefit, bringing that academy back down there. The things Eric was talking about, this shoot house with the simunitions and training with firearms. Again, no live rounds, all that various training that we can do with those rooms, those auditorium rooms. Now that we have the 10-hour days, we have the ability to train officers on the shift, meaning they can come off their shift, go to training, and go right back on their shift again. This is something we've never had before. Other than when I first came on, we had a firing range down at the PSB for a short period of time, and we would go off road, do our firing, qualifications, go back on our road. Now what we do is we go out to a firing range. These officers lose an entire day, and then we have to give them an adjusted rest day the next day. And we lose them for sometimes 2 or 3 days for training. With this new building, we will be able to do the simunitions, the various in-service trainings right on the shift, right at our own building, and save a tremendous amount of time and not lose officers to training, but have them train and then go back on our shift. So, because the ultimate goal is to keep officers on the road. This 10-hour day helps us, but this building will help us even more.
Other questions?
One last clarifying question. Commissioner OJ, you mentioned that take-home cars or officers that come.
There is, yeah, though we're obviously building toward a more non-car accessible community here. There's an intractable need, especially for police, for a lot of vehicles. Virtually everybody drives his or her own car to the office, as it were, and then his or her own office, when they're on patrol, is a marked police cruiser. So there's essentially a double need for stacking cars. So to that end, we have identified a number of parking spots on the campus and maximize that.
Taking them from Erie Boulevard, what is it called,
Yes, that would
Police
be,
East or something?
Patrol East, virtually,
Patrol East.
traffic, virtually everybody other than light-duty vehicle repair would move over from Patrol East.
And then eventually phasing that out and
then
putting it back
totally
on,
put-
which
yeah,
you said that
we're putting
earlier.
up a pole barn on this property, in which we could put cars onto a lift and get needed repairs done. And then totally vacating and disposing of.
Well, I'd like to commend, obviously, the city administration and the police department, fire department, and the developer for putting this all together for us. It's about time our city police department moves into a 21st century building, you know, with all the amenities that you deserve, because certainly you're out there every single day helping us out in the city, and we appreciate all your efforts too, so.
Hey, Counselor, I do have to tell you this interesting story. So just as, again, relates to this building, but when I'm on the phone with one of you, if I'm in my office and I don't actually stand in the middle of that room, when I'm on the phone with the mayor, the deputy mayor, any of you, if I don't move to an actual center of that room in a strategic location, sometimes I joke that I have to go like that and do like an antenna. We will lose the signal in there and you will start to hear every fifth word, because the building just doesn't.
With me, sometimes that's good, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, right. Sometimes I pretend like that's happening when it doesn't, so I can get off the phone with you. No, but it's just one more instance that this building was built before cell phones, before computers, before all this progressive stuff, and it just doesn't fit anymore, you know?
You know, I just want to say this. I have been around for a long time, and I have never had a police chief or a fire chief who return calls as late as you guys do at night. I really appreciate it, and the people in the city really appreciate it too. So, thank you.
You know, just a last thing, you know, when I was, I went over there for a tour, one of the things that really disturbed me was the fact that there was not like a comfortable room where you can take lunch. It's just.
Or kitchen, for that matter.
Right. And as somebody that loves food, I would have a problem with that. You know?
Well, we'll have to go up to Blarney Stone then, right up the street.
I prefer swallows.
So, and for us, just, you know, for our officers and firefighters not being able to, you know, sit down and relax, you know, I got a problem with that, and I think all of us here do.
Now that you mention it, I think in the tour, I saw a couple people opening windows to use their cell phones. I thought they were looking for air. It's just to use the cell phone. Okay.
Well, any other questions? Well, that will conclude our meeting. Thank you all for coming and staying for 1 hour. Appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.